Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I am so excited that you're here. I know that we are finally talking about Quicksilver. I've been talking about it for the past couple of weeks, and I hope that this episode does like justice. I hope that it makes you want to read it. And this is going to be an episode where I will tell you all the twists, all the details, plots, everything. I will tell you before I say, like, hey, these are heavy spoilers. Like, I'm going to tell you, like, I will make sure that it's known so that if you just want to know about the book, but you will read it, and so you don't want to know, like, the, you know, reveals, then I'll definitely let you know. And if you don't have time to read this book, like, perfect episode for you. I will say that I have done this episode before, like just like previous to this, and then everything didn't save and I lost everything. So I'm hoping that I can do better this round. You won't know about the other round, like what all I said in that. So I'm hoping that I remember everything and that everything just kind of makes sense. And if it doesn't, then read the book or write in the comments of YouTube if something doesn't make sense, and we can go from there. I did talk to my sister a lot about this book because it is one of the books that I was like, drop everything. You have to read this. Like, this is incredible. And I haven't done that in a while. The one before this was The Dark Window. And then I think before that was Bride and so on and so forth. So it doesn't happen very often. The books that I'm like, you have to read this like immediately. But when it does, she gets it. Like she knows. She came from Crescent City Books. Like she just barely finished that series. And so when we were talking about this book, she was telling me that this book was very easy to read. It didn't hurt her brain. Like it was very refreshing, because I feel, and she also feels in Sarah J. Maas books, that there is so much detail, so much world building, like at the beginning, that you're very, very confused and there's just too much to take in. But with this book, it was great pacing, great characters. The plot was great. The world building was really great. It was simple enough that you understood it, but it was in depth enough that you wanted to like learn more as well. And it made sense. And yeah, the characters have depth that if they're not an important character, they don't give a lot of details. But if they are important to the story, there's enough details that you want more, but you're good with how it is. Like it's just a very interesting book. And like the main female character, the main male character, Saris, who is the main female character, she's bold, she's strong, like she knows who she is. She's not a brat. She's very much like, how can I help? Like I want to improve. I want to do this, and like holds her ground. She learns from her mistakes. She is just well versatile in a lot of different things. And then with our main male character, which we will learn, we'll call him Fisher. He is the grumpy, enemies to lovers, but he's like humble in like different situations that like he just wants to protect his friends and his kingdom. And we'll get more into that, into who they are. So obviously my sister has read it for the mother sister standard. We highly recommend to my sister-in-law to read it. We told her like, put it on your list, like you have to. And I know once she reads it and then she talks to us more about it, I know my mom is going to want to read it. I don't think, and we told her this, like, we don't think that it's like her vibe, that she would like super love it, but it could surprise us. Like it could surprise her as well. We just are like, if you want to, like, go ahead. So we'll see on that. This is a one person point of view, so it's just Saris, which I really liked. And the world, like there wasn't a whole like dump truck of detail at the beginning. It's spread throughout the book, honestly, and the timing for the information, that it's like around the point where you're like, oh wait, what about this? And then it's like answered. It's as if like Callie Hart, the author, it's as if she like knew the questions that we would ask and then answer them throughout like the next couple chapters of you like thinking that. It's very well written. It's very like, it's not elaborate writing. It's like middle where there's some like more in-depth sentence structures and but it was so easy to understand, and I don't even know if that makes sense. But you know, the high level books that you're like, oh my gosh, what are they trying to say in this sentence? And then there's the ones that you're like, okay, this is kind of elementary writing. This was like very much in the middle, that you didn't even notice the writing. Like I didn't, at least. Like it was very much on my level, and the spice scale was perfect for me. I would say it's around like a 3. And even my sister was like, oh, like 3.5. It was a bit too much for her. There was about 2 scenes in it, and I thought it was the perfect amount of detail and description, and just like you're in it. But then there's some like fade to black a little bit, and I think for her there was a little bit too much description in certain parts of it that she was like, it's a little bit too much. So if you are more on like the sister scale with spice, then just know that you might want to skip. But if you're like my level, that I feel like by now you guys kind of know my boundaries of like what levels I am for spice. And this was perfect. Like it was perfect. There was so much tension throughout the book too, that you're like, come on, like just okay. Like it was just palpable tension, like sexual tension. It was perfect. The characters were great. Like I said, Saris, like she had a lot to learn, but she took it in stride. Like she is just a very well-rounded character, and I really liked it. And this book doesn't end in a cliffhanger. Like it's the type of book that you can easily read it as a one-off, but if the author does like write more books with it, 100% I would read it, because it can continue even if it's with their story or with a different character story. I would 100% read it. Like either way, I still want to stay in this world. I still want to know more about it. I want to know about these characters. I want to know everything that has to do with this. And so she left it pretty open, which is really nice that it didn't end on a cliffhanger, because sometimes that is really frustrating. But it left you wanting more that there could be, and it was really great. So let's get into more of the plot. So we have Saris and Hayden, and their world is called Zilvarin. And it sounds like there's like a main hub, kind of like the capital in Hunger Games, but then there's 7 different cities, and they call them spokes. And I don't know like their culture, I don't know their climate, I don't know their environment, like I don't know that stuff. It isn't really spoke about a lot, but Saris and her brother are in the 3rd spoke. And I want to say that that's probably like the poorest one. It's very desert. There's hardly any water. They get portions, or like they get allowances for water, but even then they don't really get it. They've kind of all been pushed there. There's rumors around the other spokes that they have the plague, and it really is just an excuse for the capital, or like the middle part, I'm just going to call it the capital, to like murder them and kill them because they ask questions and they want to know what's happening. And the guards and like the royal does not. We have Queen Maudra. She has been ruler over 1,000 years. She's human, but they don't know a lot about her and how she has ruled for that long. But she's very strict. She's very like evil. And she has these guardians, which are her like personal guards. They're very, very well trained, and they kind of scout throughout the different spokes, just to kind of keep the peace. But really, like, they're causing more contention and just like killing everybody, it seems like. So Saris is a glassmaker apprentice, and so she has. It's kind of hinted here and then throughout the book, and then obviously when we get to like the main plot, but that she has some sort of magic, like she can talk to metals. And so she's become this apprentice and is able to help shape these weapons. And when we first get into the book, she is fighting with this guardian. And I want to say that she like was stealing from this market, and she was caught, and he takes off one of his gauntlets, I think that's what it's called. I'm going to call it a cuff. And he takes it off, and she grabs it, and she climbs a wall and gets over into the third spoke, or the wherever they live. She was in a different spoke at the time. And so the guardians are all after her. People are watching for her. She runs to this glass shop where she apprenticed, and she's like, hey, I need to use your forge. I want to melt this down. And he's like, no, 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 no. Like this guy has been like a father figure to her since her mom died. He's like, no, 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 I don't want anything to do with this. And she's like, fine. And so she puts it in her bag and she goes to try and find her brother. She finds out that he's been kicked out of the tavern again for like cheating cards and has been like beat up. And so she goes in and talks to the leader of this group. His name's Carrion. We don't know very much about him. We know that they slept together at one point, but she's like, hey, like I told you to not let him play anymore. Like, why did you beat him up? And he's like, well, it just kind of goes with it. Like I had to, I couldn't show favoritism. And she's like, ah. And so she tells him a little bit about the brace or whatever. And he's like, please tell me you didn't do this. Like, we have to hide it. We have to do this. And she's like, where's Hayden? So she goes to find Hayden. He was supposed to be outside waiting for her. And he has taken the bag and has run. And so she is trying to follow him. She finds him and he is being attacked by these guards because they found the cuff. And she's like, no, 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 this is mine. Like, please, like, don't touch him. Like, this was all me. And so they're like, okay, like we're going to take you in. She decides that she's going to fight them. So she kills two guards, which is unheard of. Like she's pretty skilled. We don't really know how she found out. I want to say that she says that she like taught herself, or maybe there was someone that taught her. I don't know if it was like the glasswork guy that she had as a father figure. I'm not exactly sure. But she is able to kill them. And then they're able to kind of overpower her. They take her into this palace and it's just very monstrous, kind of scary. And they're like, you're going to meet with Queen Maudra. And she's like, I have nothing to say to Queen Maudra. Like, I will fight. Like, and they're like, well, she's going to do your sentencing, so you don't really have a choice. She's not really there. It sounds like she's kind of conjured up through these mirrors. And so I don't know if she like comes out of this mirror or something happens. So she's like, how did you learn to fight? How did you kill my guardians? They're the very best trained. And then out of the blue, she's like, it was the Fae, wasn't it? And at this point in the story, we're like, oh, Fae. Okay, like Fae is being added to this. Okay, I love this. I love this world that's building. Like, where are they at? What's happening? And Madra is like, they found a way through. Like, they've come for me at last. Like, they're warmongers, like cannibals, like beastly creatures. And she's like, you know what? When I cast them out, like the seven cities rejoiced, like they were so happy. And now they've sent you to kill me. And Saris is like, what? Like, no, like I only know of like this folklore with the Fae. Like, I don't know anything about it. Like, thousands and thousands of years ago, like, I am not from the Fae. Like, I am just from this spoke, and you're not treating us right. Like, she kind of like speaks up, and the queen is like, well, you're not gonna have a spoke anymore because they're all gonna die. Like, I'm just gonna kill all of them. Like, too bad, so sad. And then she goes to the captain of the guard and she's like, okay, kill her. Like, you know what to do. And so then the queen like disappears. And the captain of the guard comes after Saris and she's able to fight him. And there's this platform that when she first went into this like royal room, she was very drawn towards it. And the captain of the guard was like, no, we're going this way. And so she's fighting this captain and she injures him. And I don't know if she's injured yet, but I don't think she is yet, because she goes and there's this sword in the ground and the captain is like, no, 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 don't touch that sword. Like, do not turn the key. Don't open the gate. Like, you will unleash like hell on this place. And she's like, well, I gotta like defend myself. And so she like takes the knife, or takes the sword, pulls it out. I want to say it's like Sword in the Stone. And there's this like platform that it looks like it's solid silver, but it's a pool now. And so she's like, okay. And it's screaming at me like it's the Quicksilver, that she's like, I don't know what's happening. So she's fighting this captain of the guard. He stabs her. She's like dying. And he's like dead as well. She like kills him too. So then all of a sudden she sees this figure come out of this pool. And she's like, it's death. Death is here for me. Like, what am I going to do? And he takes the sword. We learn that the sword is, I think it's called like Solace or something. And it called to him. And then he saw her and she's dying. And he picks her up and takes her into the portal. And we're like, I was like, oh my gosh, where are they going? What's happening? Like, I am invested. Like, tell me everything that's going on. She wakes up 10 days later, and there is this woman beside her. She has pointy ears, and she introduced herself as Everlane. She is the princess of this place. And she's like, okay, what is this place? And she's like, you are at Yavelia, like the Winter Palace. And they are Fae. She is in the Fae realm now, the Fae world. They have been waiting for someone to pull that sword out, and they're so glad that they found her along with it, because this Quicksilver pool is a portal to the different worlds, and these different worlds and kingdoms, that's how they would trade. And so it's been closed for years, for like thousands of years. Madra was the one that actually closed it, and so they hate her. And she and Saris was able to call to this Quicksilver. And so that's why they're like, we're so glad you're here. We're glad we found you. Like, you opened this. And now I'm going to go take you to the king, which is Belicon. Belicon is kind of an evil ruler. He is very much like, very selfish, very like, oh, you owe a debt to us now. Like, we saved you. Saris is like, well, I have to get back. Like, I have to go and help my brother. Like, Madra says that she's going to kill everyone. Like, I have to go and save them. And the king's like, well, if she said that, like, they're probably dead. And so Saris is like freaking out. And he's like, you know what? You're charged with awakening the Quicksilver and reopening the pathways. Like, now you have to figure out how to do it again for us. Like, you're going to stay here until you do. He then brings out this guy that it just seems like he's gone feral. And he's like, gosh, I feel like the universe is not wanting me to record this episode, because then the camera just died. So I apologize if you were watching this. Obviously, you can't see me now, but I'm just going to keep continuing because I don't have another battery for the camera. So today's episode, gosh, it's just been rough. So hopefully everything's made sense. The King of Yavelia brought out this guy that was manic. And he's like calling him a dog. Like, he is just being rude to him and like wants to murder him. And Everlane looks at this person that's on like the council, and she's like, you have to help him. And this lady, like, she speaks up, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, the oracle sees. And so she's like, she basically gives this like citing, whatever they call it, that it's not time to kill him, that he's going to help, that just all this stuff just to save him. And then a guy from the back comes up, and he is the general. And he's like, we need him. Like, we need him at the front to help us win this war. Like, I will take him back to like the war camp. Like, you won't have to see him at all. At this point, I'm like, okay, why does the king hate him? Like, what has he done? Who is this guy? And they call him the Kingfisher. He is the main male character. We're going to just call him Fisher though. And they're like, okay, we'll take him. We find out that he's manic and feral because he needed the amulet that was put on Saris. So he came through the portal with like Quicksilver and everything. And apparently to go through Quicksilver, you have to have this like enchanted relic in order for you to be safe. If you are crossing through the Quicksilver without one, then the Quicksilver basically like burns you alive and like it's absorbed. So with Fisher, at one point he went through I want to say that it was like a really dire time. He went through it, and the Quicksilver didn't kill him. It just absorbed into him. And so if he doesn't have one of those relics on him, then he starts to go feral and just loses his mind. And so in order for him to take Ceres through the Quicksilver, he had to put it on him. And so when they take him out of like the throne room, they put it on him and his like relics and everything. And so it takes a while for him to kind of like calm down and come to his senses. And so it's like the four of them in this room. It's like it's the general, it's Everlane, it's Ceres, and it's Fisher. And they tell Ceres that the reason why she is so important is because she is an alchemist, and she is able to talk to the Quicksilver. They don't really know what she is specifically yet, but Fisher felt Solace, which is the sword, calling, and he answered, and he found it in Ceres's hands. And apparently, nobody else could be with the sword or like touch the sword unless they have like Quicksilver in them. They don't know a lot about the alchemist process. I guess that it was a long, long time ago, like thousands of years, because I mean, the Quicksilver has been closed for thousands of years. And so these alchemists at that time were able to talk to Quicksilver and have it become malleable and put into these amulets and these relics and into like weapons and everything like that. But they don't know a lot about it. And so they need to start researching because there's a deadline or a timeline that the king gave to Ceres to help them and to talk to the Quicksilver and get it like going again for like these trade routes. That's how kind of like the story gets going, is that they're in this library. They're all kind of getting to know each other. We're getting to know the world more, that these Quicksilver pools are the pathways to the different realms. Fisher kind of has like a tragic past. Like when he was 10, so him and Everlane actually share a mother. When he was 10, the king sent his father on a mission and he never returned. And so when the gateways were stilled, the king said that it was Fisher's father that was responsible for the Quicksilver stilling and declared him like a traitor. And so he's always hated Fisher. And once that happened, then the king went and took Fisher's mother and married her. And he's just like a really corrupt guy. So Ceres is still freaking out about her brother and her friends. And she's like, okay, in order for me to help you, like I need to know that they're safe and I need you to bring my brother to me. And like, that's the only way that I'm going to do this. Fisher's like, okay, if I go and get your brother, then you can help me forge like new relics and any other like instruments for this war. She's like, okay, deal. So he goes, he comes back. I don't know like the time frame. I want to say it's like the same day. He comes back with a bloodied guy. And she's like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. She goes to see him and it's Carrion, like the leader of that group from earlier. It's him. And she's like, this is not Hayden. Like, why did you bring me him? And Fisher's like, he said that he was your brother, that he was Hayden, and he smelt like you. Ceres has to tell Fisher, like, no, this is not Hayden. The reason he smells like me, like, we slept together, like, a long time ago. I don't know how he still smells like me. That's when Carrie Ann is like, oh, everything's okay. Like, Hayden is safe. Like, you don't have to worry about him. Like, where are we? Kind of freaking out. And from here, we really like Carrion. Like, he is like kind of a goofy guy, kind of like brings humor into the story. Like, we really like him. And so he was like a nice surprise that was added. And she tells Fisher, like, hey, like, can you please return us? And he's like, I'll release you and like return you there. Like, you just have to make enough relics for my people. Like, that's what the promise that you made. That's what we need to do. And so she's like, okay, so she is in the forge every day. She is trying all these different recipes to combine Quicksilver. They're just not working. Like, nothing she's finding is working. And so they go to the war camp. And at this war camp, it is like their camp, and then there's a river, and then there's the other camp or the other like fortress of these vampires. So vampires get introduced to the story. And there are these vampires, they're called feeders. So when a vampire bites you, if they give you their blood, then you turn into like a vampire that has your mind still, that you can think for yourself, and like Twilight. But If they don't give you your blood, then you just kind of go insane and you become this feeder. You are mindless, like you're just basically a minion. And so these feeders are up against the edge of this river. They can't swim, they can't go through it. But occasionally the ice, like the river, it freezes, and so they're able to cross. And when they're about like to cross and everything, an alarm goes off. Everyone goes out there. They have these big like hammers of this machine that breaks the ice, and so they can't get through. So they have to go through that like every couple of days or like once a week. It just depends on like the weather and everything. In order, like they are kind of rushed. Like they want her to talk to this Quicksilver because they want to start this trade, because the silver is what kills the feeders and like the vampires, and so they're running like really low on stock. And so they also want these relics and these weapons kind of like enchanted so that they are able to kill these feeders as well. And so they're at this war camp. They are trying to get across, and Ceres helps like defend them and like kill these vampires. And once they like break the ice and everything, there's this guy that comes out, and they're like, "Oh, that's Malcolm." And Malcolm is a high fae vampire. So he was the very first. So the fae were cursed, like the fae in general were cursed thousands of years ago. The fae turned into something like Malik. And when the cure was found by Fisher's great grandfather, most of the Yevelian fae took it so that they wouldn't stay a vampire. But Malcolm, he was the first to be affected by the blood curse. And when Rurik Dianthus, he was the last Yevelian king. When he discovered the cure, Malcolm was one of the few who chose to remain vampires. And so when a victim becomes bound, like a victim becomes bound to the vampire if they are bit. So he is just there. He's kind of evil. They have this war. That's who the war that they're talking about is against, is Malcolm and these vampires. And so Ceres is in their forge, still trying to figure out like what they're going to do. I think at this point, her and Fisher have maybe kissed, but they still have like a lot of sexual tension between them, obviously. And there is one of Fisher's group. They call them like the Wolves. They're the very powerful cadre, like in Throne of Glass. He comes in, he's very nice. He has brought this sword that belongs to another one of the wolves, and he's like, "Hey, practice on this. Like, let's try and figure it out. Like, have you tried to ask the Quicksilver, like melding it with the pure silver?" And she's like, "Of course not. Like, I haven't tried that. Like, that's ridiculous." And then the Quicksilver speaks to her, and it says, "Music. Give us music, and we will obey." And so she knows that Reneth, the guy that is with her, has a really great singing voice and sings. And she's like, "Hey, will you sing a song for it?" And he's like, "Okay." So he sings this beautiful song, and the Quicksilver accepts and is like, "Okay, like we will bond with the sword, give us blood." And so Reneth gives his blood, and the Quicksilver's like, "Amazing. Thank you so much." Basically goes silent. And Reneth can't remember the song that he sang. Like, it's completely forgotten. But now the sword is like his. It's like bound to him, and they call it like angel's breath or something. And it's this huge big deal, obviously. And so now she knows she just needs to speak with the Quicksilver, and it's so exciting. I don't know if there was an ambush yet, but a little bit more about the war, because you're thinking like, why don't you just go over and like kill them? Why don't you just go and do this? But they are bound by the rules of war. So they can't use magic to attack or affect the enemy until the enemy has breached their border. And their magic also doesn't work on like the vampire soil. At that point, I think the ambush does happen. There's like a bunch of vampires that come into the camp and are trying to kill Ceres because they want Ceres, obviously, because they know that she is this alchemist and can bend metal. And they're able to fight them. They're able to like kill them. They go to the edge of the river. Malcolm is there. And okay, everyone, like I'll kind of leave you on a cliffhanger. This is where there's going to be a lot of spoilers from here. Like I'm going to tell you pretty much exactly what happens, twists, turns, plot changes, like aha moments. This is where you're going to learn about all of them after this. So if you're not ready to know about it and you want to read the book, or you don't want to read the book but you don't want to know about it, or what other situations where you are going to read the book but you can't wait to like read about it, that is where like this is for you. So at this point, and if you are going to be turning away or turning it off, go to a different episode, or like and follow, and tell me your thoughts and feelings in the comments on YouTube. And wherever you are listening to this, if you can rate and review, that also helps as well. Okay, so let's keep going if you're here for the ride. So they are at the river. Malcolm is there. He has Everlane. She has been bitten. And they have 12 hours before she's either turned into a feeder or she has to accept Malcolm's blood, which they don't know if he's even going to offer his blood to her. And so they're like, okay, like we got to go back to the library. We got to do some research. We got to figure out what we need to do to get her back. And so they go back to the palace and they're trying to figure out all this. And then Fisher kind of like disappears. And I don't know if he left a note or how they found out, but he had gone to the fortress to find and save Everlane. And so they're like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And I think he had told them that he was going to open this like portal, because he can portal throughout the world, like the kingdom or whatever, but he can't go to like the different worlds. So they know that he's going to be doing this. So they're like, hey, there's kind of a delay. When she gets pushed through, we are going to go there to save him, because we know that he's probably going to sacrifice himself. And there's just a lot going on. Like, we're going to do that. So that's what they do. They push Everlane through. They have a healer there. They have a witch there to try and figure out how to reverse the vampirism. And so then it's Carrion and the general and Reneth and then Saris. They go through. And they go up to this platform. I don't know if they have to like fight their way through or anything, but they go to this platform, and that's where like Fisher is. And there are 3 thrones. There is Malcolm, there is Bellicon, and there is Madra. And at this point, we thought Malcolm and Bellicon hated each other, and that's what the war is for. And we also thought that both of them hated Madra because she is the one that canceled all, like, stopped the Quicksilver and the trade routes and everything like that. So I'm confused. I don't know if it does tell us, and maybe I missed it, how they really are, like, okay with each other. I know, which actually it kind of tells me right here. So they're like, what the heck? And like, what about this war? And Bellicon is like, war? Like, we haven't been at war. Like, I've simply been feeding my brother's army. But it's like, why? Like, oh, sorry. It just dawned on me. Okay, so they are wanting to create this army and then open the Quicksilver and go and take over other realms. It just clicked on me. That's what they want to do. But I don't know why Madra didn't want that. You know, like, why did she cancel the Quicksilver, but now it's okay? Like, I don't know. I'm confused about that. They do explain that they are the triumvirate. Triumvirate. I don't know how to say that, but there's 3 crowns sharing one source. So to kill one of us, you must kill us all, and that's no easy task. So they are kind of fighting. I don't know if they're fighting the minions. I don't know if they're trying to fight these royals. But at one point, Saris is being chased by Malcolm, maybe? But she goes towards, like, she can hear this big pool of Quicksilver calling to her. So I want to say that she runs towards it so that it can help her, maybe? Or she's trying to find it for a certain purpose, and I cannot remember why. But she does get, like, caught, and they're like, like, we're gonna kill you. She does get really injured, and they're all brought together. This is kind of where the crown is saying their piece, or saying, like, haha, we got you. just giving more information there. And that's when Carrion kind of like starts to goad them, especially Malcolm. He's like, like talking crap to him and saying like, oh, just come and bite me then, come and bite me. And so Malcolm's like, fine, I will. So he bites him, and Carrion starts laughing, and he's like, my name is Carrion Swift, but there was a time when I was known as Carrion Dianthus, firstborn son to Rurik and Amelia Dianthus. And Malcolm's like, what, you tricked me, into drinking Dianthus blood? I guess if these three drink Dianthus blood, then they are killed. And they don't have to do like all three. I don't really know how that worked. It was kind of confusing because they said like to kill all of us you have to, or to kill one of us you have to kill all of us. But maybe with this blood it kind of cancels it out, and it killed all three of them. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, that is so lucky. But also, I had no idea. It's very hidden, and it is such a good reveal that, because at this point you love Carrion. He's so funny. He's silly. Like, he is a good character, and you're like, oh my gosh, he knew. Like, he knew. And he still was there, and he was still helping. Like, it all worked perfectly, of course. And Saris is dying. Like, she is gravely injured. They don't know what's happening. There is the right-hand person of Malcolm. His name's Tal. He is just as powerful as Malcolm. And he's actually an okay guy. He's a good guy. And he's like, hey, do you want me to turn her? Like, that's the only way that I think that she could survive. And so Fisher's like, yes, like, please do it, please do it. And she passes out, and she is brought before the gods. There's not a lot of mention of the gods, just like here and there. You don't know very much about it. But she is brought to them, and they are the keepers of the Quicksilver. And they say like, hey, we want an audience with you. Like, by transforming you into something that has never been seen before, the universe cannot focus on what they don't recognize, like kind of wordy type stuff. But they turn her into Fae, and they are able to like bring her back to life basically. And they're so happy. And I don't know if I mentioned this yet. If I did, I apologize. But honestly, I've recorded this like 3 times now. But there is a story that Fisher tells her that his mother was an oracle, and she prophesied about Saris. And she told Fisher in like this journal about Saris. And she drew her as well. And the features were perfect except for her ears. Because when Fisher first found Saris, she had human ears. And he was like, okay, this is her, but the ears are wrong. That's interesting. And so that prompted him to pick her up and bring her to the world or whatever. And so now she has Fae ears because she is Fae. And I think a vampire too. And an alchemist. And yeah, so her and Fisher, they're good. They've like all the vampires, like the feeders, have died because Malcolm is dead. They were able to save Everlane. And so at this point you're like, okay, it could go on because we really like the general, we really like Everlane, we really like Carrion. Like, there's openings that there could be another book, but it was very much closed out as well, that you're like, I really like this, and there isn't an urge to keep going. Like, everything just kind of ties up. And so I would love it if she wrote more books. I know that she does have other books out. I don't know if they are fantasy, or maybe this is like her first fantasy one. But it was very well written. Like, it will be in my top for the year for sure, because that's how much I loved it. So I apologize that the video cut halfway through. If this doesn't make sense, I'm trying to like splice through different things. It was just, I don't know why everything just went wrong today. It was weird. So again, I hope everything made sense. Hope I did this book justice, and just know that it would be so worth it if you read it. If you love fantasy, enemies to lovers, creating this world with some fae, but an easy, understandable world, like, this is definitely for you. And I just hope that you read it because it is definitely worth the hype. And found it on TikTok, and it just was so good. So, anyways, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you read this book, and I will talk to you next week.